Welcome back. I wanted to do a short video here on our pumpkins because for whatever reason, our pumpkin harvest this year was sad. It was pathetic. We planted more than we ever had, and we'll get an actual count on how many pumpkins we saved this year. It's not very many, but I wanted more than anything to have a timestamp on when our pumpkin harvest was done this year. And we planted right around Father's Day, I believe. I'd have to look at the calendar again. But look how sad this garden looks. And in years past, she's used Sevin Dust to kind of help keep the bugs away. But because this garden is so close to my vegetable garden, I don't want any chemicals on it. So that's part of the reason why we're separating this garden from our vegetable garden next year, because I don't want the chemicals on it. We're not eating the pumpkins. It's purely for decoration. So I don't care if we use some chemicals on it. They get washed anyway. But this garden, today is August the 21st, I believe. And it's done. There's 5 pumpkins out here that we just counted. And one of them's about half rotten already. This time last year, I believe we were still in full swing. Plants were looking great, but the squash bugs have been absolutely horrible this year. So we've got dead stuff everywhere, and we've got a little bit of powdery mildew. So you've got your powdery mildew, which is terrible, but that's something we live with. And we planted 3 hills of like 6 varieties here.
There were 24 plants in here altogether.
And they're just crammed in too tight. Jana likes them cross-pollinating because it's just like playing roulette. You never know what you're going to get. Which is fine. This is her garden, not mine. But it turns into a minor jungle. So we've got a lot of different varieties of plants, but they're cross-pollinating, so we're getting all kinds of weird, different colors and shapes and sizes. It's kind of neat. We are getting a ton of male flowers and very few female flowers this year, for whatever reason. And we've had, you can see there's a plate down here where we try to get in here on some of our bigger pumpkins and get a plate or a piece of wood, something under them to kind of help protect them from just sitting on the soggy ground. But this is so thick, it's hard to walk in there. So sometimes we miss them and they rot on the bottom. We've had we have unusually dry spells, and there's spells of just torrential rain, which is killing us on these plants. This year we used a little fan. I don't know if you can see that little fan oscillating sprinkler in there. And early on I had it sitting on the ground. Well, the plants got taller than the sprinkler, so they wasn't getting watered. So I set it up on that old water trough I had out here just to give it some height, and then the plants outgrew it. So I'm gonna have to put like a tripod sprinkler on it, or I've bought some more soaker hoses. We may go with the soaker hose next year, but that fan sprinkler is just not cutting it for these tall plants. It's just not getting, like, everything here is getting watered, but stuff down there don't get watered much, which could be some of the dying issues on top of the bug. Definitely need taller sprinklers. I've seen some sprinklers where you drive T-posts in the ground and then strap the sprinkler to that. That might be the direction we need to go next year. I don't know. All of the pumpkins are being moved out to pasture right now. We have finished our chicken tractor, and we're actually moving it in the pasture right now to kind of help amend that soil because it's never been farmed before. So next year will be a little tricky getting the soil right. Just hard clay around here, that's all we have. But we'll take you along for that journey. And we'll see how this goes. We're gonna end this video. I'll get a count of how many pumpkins we were actually able to save up till this point, and maybe let you look at those. So we have 19 pumpkins here that are salvageable. We've got these three. They may be crosses. I don't know. She just comes up with some cool looking pumpkins just by throwing her stuff in there and letting it go. She don't care about having purebred pumpkins. So these three are iffy. We've got some that are a little squishy, and we've had bugs boring holes in them. It's been terrible. So there's 19 different pumpkins here that may be salvageable. I threw in some spaghetti squash too, just because they kind of look cool, and why not? Let's go back here to the backyard and see if we can count some more. Okay, so here's a few more that we have. Some of them are got some kind of board beetle in there and they're leaking. Look, so 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. That one's getting rotted. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 35 of them. That one may or may not survive. These little ornamental pumpkins, they did great last year. We had a ton of them. This year, they're doing okay, but not super great.
We don't have any more in there.
Alright, so we have a few more in the house. We probably have only been able to save about 35 or 40 pumpkins so far, which is
Sad.
usually, that's about half of where we're typically at this time of year. Last year we were selling them before they were ripe off the vine. We just had to wait until it. This year, and that was well up into October. This year we're at the end of August, and our vines are done, so we're not going to have near the harvest that we did last year. We did not keep a record last year of how many we had harvested or sold. We were doing it for fun last year. We're trying to recoup some of our money this year because farming is getting expensive. But we have, she has previous videos of what we have planted. We have 2 other small pumpkin patches that are just not producing very well. I don't know if it's inconsistency with watering. Of course, last year we were off work for about 6 months with the COVID, and we were at home. We were able to tend to them a little better. Now we're back to both having our full-time jobs. It's just been harder this year than we expected with the working as much as we do. So we're gonna try again next year. We're not giving up on this year, but we'll see how it goes. I wanted to do this video basically to remind myself not to do my garden like this next year. I planted 5 Polish linguistas. 2 of them died out early, but they just got packed in here so much with these tomato cages. The tomato cages, I have problems with them falling over. Don't want to do that no more. I can't get in there to trim the lower branches to cut down on the blight. Tomato cages are crap. But the Polish linguistas are producing really well. I like them. I may plant them again next year, not sure yet. And then my pepper fields here, I had 3 rows of poblanos that all turned into one nasty jungle. Definitely don't plant that many. I can't remember how far apart I planted them. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 inches, it looks like. But these plants have gotten so big, they're falling over and splitting. They need to be supported next year. I can't remember when we started these seeds. January, February, March, somewhere in there, in the house. We don't want to do that. We're going to try the greenhouse. It'll be done, hopefully. Let's start off with, at last count, I had 85 total pepper plants that survived. Not sure exactly where I'm at now, because as you can see, it's a freaking mess. My Anaheim chilies did really well, but same thing, they got so big they're breaking over and falling. You have to support those as they get a little bit bigger. My jalapenos, I don't remember what variety of jalapenos I planted, but I'm not gonna plant them again if I can ever figure out what they are, because they just stayed little. Don't want those anymore. Bell peppers, I've got 3 different rows. I planted, they're all California Wonders, but half of them came from Burpee, I believe, and the other half was Ferry Morris. And I did it just to see which variety or which company's seeds were more viable. The Burpees came up a lot faster, but the Ferry Morris, Jesus, came up and they produced just the same. They were just 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And they all produced really well. I can't complain about it, but I want some color in my bell peppers next year. Our sun cherry tomatoes, those were the only 2 plants that were store-bought. And I'm not going to plant them next year. In the years past, they've been really good. I wasn't super impressed with them this year. I'm going to change it up. Maybe plant some different ones. We planted those primarily just for snacking while we're in the garden. Don't care to plant those again next year. I have 3 more rows of poblanos here, and my intention with the poblanos was, God, son, was to let them turn red and make chili powder out of them. They're not turning red. They've been in the ground. I mean, they've been producing for months, and they're not turning, so I don't know what to do. And to my absolute jungle here, we went on vacation, and it rained, and my plants all fell over, and it just turned into a jungle because I couldn't get in there to tie them back up. And I planted, this row is San Marzanos. I do not remember how many plants I planted in there. I would say probably 6. And I definitely need to space them out more, because I crammed, when the garden's empty in the spring, this thing looks huge. This time of year, it looks like a tiny jungle. So we're crawling on our hands and knees through this stuff. I don't want to do that next year. Hence the video, so I can go back and watch this and say, don't be dumb. So I've got 2 rows crammed in here of Amish paste. I absolutely love these Amish paste. They're the best tasting paste tomato. And by the way, that's all I planted this year was paste tomatoes, because all I cared about was canning. And these paste tomatoes taste great on a sandwich anyway, especially the Amish paste. The Amish paste are not as prolific as the San Marzanos or the Polish Linguistas, but they taste a lot better and a lot meatier tomato. So I'm definitely planting these again. I don't know if I'll plant the San Marzanos or not. They're just not much to them. So I think I'm going to plant Amish paste, maybe Polish Linguista, and I found two more that I don't remember the brand or the variety, but I'll have to look that up and figure out what I'm going to plant next year. I think Jana's moving her pumpkin patch next year, so the garden will expand. So I'm not going to plant any more plants than what I have this year, but I'm going to just spread them out so I can walk in between my rows. So this garden, our sunflowers I want to move to the front next year so we can actually get back to them too. I wanted to plant the sunflowers in theory because they're giant yellow flowers towering above everything else, and in my thought process I was thinking, okay, well the bees will be able to see that a lot further away and will be able to find our garden a little bit faster. I don't know if it makes sense, but it did to me. So that's why I did it. And we harvest the sunflowers. So we'll harvest some. We'll pick the biggest and best looking ones, and we'll harvest for seeds. And the rest of it we'll make bird seed, because my wife likes to watch the birds out the window, and what we don't use for that we'll feed our chickens. So we're going to plant a lot more next year just because it helps offset the cost of chicken feed, and sunflower seeds are cheap if you're planting. I'm going to get rid of all of the tomato cages next year and go to the trellis system. It's so much easier to get in and trim up, just to kind of keep airflow going. And that mess I've got right there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 tomato plants that ended up 9-10 feet tall. You just can't manage that with those cages, and definitely the way I've got them crammed in there. Our marigolds never did very good this year. Last year this whole thing was covered in different colored marigolds, and we didn't have near the problem with bugs as we do this year. Maybe I need to plant them earlier. I don't know what happened. And we have, let's go back over here for a second. So we have these weeds right here, and I don't have a clue what they are, but I left them intentionally because they're a good ground cover. They grow real flat to the ground and help choke out everything else. You know, you still get a little bit in there, but they cover the ground really well. So I left that early on in the season, and so far it really helped. I really like it. It kind of blankets everything and really helps choke out a lot of weeds. So if you know what that is, let me know. We are having problems with Bermuda grass, but that's part of it. So I ran out of the cattle panel trellis, so I ended up using the rest of my tomato cages. It is what it is. That's what I had at the time, so that's what I used. I mean, look at the size, and this is some of the smaller ones of these. Come in here. This is some of the smaller Amish paste, and there's not a whole lot of juice in them. They're just thick and meaty. Awesome. Somehow I accidentally planted zucchini at the bottom of this trellis. I don't know what happened there. So that was just a wasted trellis all year. Because my zucchini plants just kind of took over. And I had planted 2 rows of bush beans, green beans, under this trellis and these trellises. Which ended up, the plants ended up way too big. And it just made it hard to walk around in here, so they got ripped out early. We ended up keeping some of these green beans, especially since this trellis was wasted. The zucchini, I ripped them out early. They just weren't producing like I wanted them to. Let's get under the shade a little bit. I forget the variety of pickling cucumbers we used here, but they were really prolific. They did good. We were able to sell a lot of these. We were able to pickle a lot. We were able to give a lot to family and friends. So I think 1 trellis of these is going to be our goal next year. They did really good. I don't know how many pounds this 1 trellis produced, but it was a lot. These are our cow peas, our black-eyed peas. I think right now we have harvested about 1.5 quarts, and they're still producing. I may do 2 trellises next year because I love black-eyed peas. I don't know. We haven't ate any of these yet, so I will eat some before I make the decision on whether to plant this variety again. But they did really well. Let's move around. This is our pole bean. Look at that sun. So I wanted to go ahead and plant 1 trellis of pole beans so I could keep producing while I was waiting on my bush beans. My bush beans, I got a harvest off of them early. And then these kept producing for a while I was hoping to get a little bit of a second harvest here. And it don't look like I'm going to. I've got a lot of blossoms, but nothing's really producing. So I'm probably going to be ripping these out. In fact, I wanted to do this video a while back and just never had time. But these bush beans had this whole area covered where you couldn't even walk in here without stepping on plants. So I think next year I'm going to plant some other kind of crop, maybe carrots or radishes, something that don't get this big. This is chaos. I like a neat and orderly garden, not a very freelancing kind of garden. I don't like my jungle. I like the garden. So this wasted trellis this year, it happened. It's my fault. But we may put in a couple of more of these trellises next year and then expand the garden just to give it some room to breathe. Give me some peace of mind and sanity. I had right here in this empty space was spaghetti squash. Cannot remember how many I planted. I would say half a dozen to a dozen seeds I planted here, and it really took over this area, which is not good. So I will probably plant a few less of them. We had bad problems with squash bugs this year, which really hurt my spaghetti squash early on, because I want to run an organic garden. So it's just some of the things I fight with. Maybe there's something out there that I could use that will help with this, but you know, on top of being healthier, I want to be able to pick up any fruit out of my garden at any time and just start eating it. I don't worry about washing it. I don't want all them chemicals on there. So we struggle with bugs. So it's fine. It's something we deal with and we get over it. I think that's all that I had. I mean, you see the size of the sunflower. That thing has got to be 15 feet tall. Just absolutely huge. Maybe. So this one we will definitely be saving seeds off of to replant next year. And probably a couple of more. But then the rest will be turned into animal food. So anyway, that's our short informational garden tour this year. And see you next time.